Hey guys, welcome back to yet another Python tutorial. So before you watch this video, ensure that you watched the previous two videos where I gave an introduction to Python, and in the previous video I explained what you need to install and what you need to have in order to start writing your Python code, or rather the necessary things that you need to do. So currently you can see I'm in my VS Code, which is the editor that I'm using. So depending on what you're going to use, just ensure it's open if you want to follow this tutorial. So we are going to start on some basics. What I have now is the line that we wrote in the previous video, where we wrote our print statement, which prints the hello string, and string is a type of data type that carries the text format. So in Python, when you are writing string, you can encapsulate it in double quotes or in single quotes. So when you're coding in Python, there are two ways you can run your Python code. For example, right now we have this file introduction.py. When you run it, it will print for you the hello. We can add some new statements. In a new line, so we can print something else. So when you want to print something, you use a print function, which is an inbuilt Python function. So inbuilt functions are the ones that they come with a Python installation, so they already exist in Python. One of them is the print, and as you can see, VS is already explaining to me about the print function. You can see the arguments that it requires, and basically it gives you a description of this function. So if you don't understand whatever function you're trying to write, this will help you. So we can print another statement: today is a good day. So we expect that when we run this particular file, we'll see these two sentences. So what I was saying is that there are two ways you can run your code. So I can run this file, or I can just write these two statements directly on my command prompt, which we did on the previous video. So this is my command prompt. So first of all, I can check the current directory which I'm in. So by just typing cd, that is current directory, and you can see I'm in my drive D. So if I want to navigate to a particular file or directory, I can still use this command, change directories. So I can say I want to open the Python tutorials. So now we are in the Python tutorials directory, and this command here, dir directory, it lists for me whatever I have in this folder. And as you can see, I have the introduction.py. that is the file that is currently open in the VS Code. So what I was saying is there are two ways I can run this code. I can directly run this file and it will do this, or I can decide to just write these two statements directly on the command prompt. So if I want to run that file, that is the script way, whereby I just say Python, that is I want to execute this file using the Python interpreter. So I say Python introduction.py, and you see it has printed the two statements that we were expecting, so that's good. Another way is I can go to the Python console by typing Python. So when you see these arrows, it means now whatever I'm writing here is Python, so I can say print hello, and it should do the same thing that the other file was doing. So you can see hello, which is the other way of running your code. So if you're not writing a very long script, you can just do it on your command prompt, or rather you can go and write your file and come and run it on your command prompt, whatever you prefer. So in Python we have different kind of identifiers. For example, there are some conventions, like when defining a class, the class name should start with a capital letter. For example, if I wanted to do all of this inside a class, don't worry if you don't understand the class concept, so because we are going to learn this later. Right now I'm just emphasizing on the identifiers and the conventions. If you want to create a class, you can use the class keyword, and maybe you can say so the thing is, when you're defining a class, creating a class, its name should start with a capital letter, and other things like functions or variables should always start with a small letter. For example, if within this class I want to create a function that prints these two statements, so there are also Python keywords. One of them is def keyword, which is used to create a function. So I can call this function let's say first function. So if you have two words within your function name, you can use the underscore, like that. So now I want these two print statements to be done when I'm running this function, and as you can see, automatically Python has given the next line some indentation, which is very necessary when you're writing your Python code, because whatever is under this function is like a block of code which I want it done whenever I call this function. So to tell Python that these two statements should be indented this way, so I can just bring them here. So whenever the indentation of your statement is wrong, you can just move them using tab. So ensure that in your settings of your VS Code, the tab basically should show 4 spaces, which is the usual indentation space in Python, or you can just type 4 spaces. Another way is by on your keyboard pressing Ctrl and the square brackets. So what I just did is I moved them further, so to return them to the correct position, you just press Ctrl and the left square brackets. So what we are saying here is, when we run this function, we should print this statement or this statement. So okay, we'll just remove the class. So I was talking about the Python keywords. One of them is the def keyword, which is used when you're defining function, and there's some other types of the many Python reserved keywords, such as and, which is a logical operator, or things like class or if, which you use when you're defining your if statements. So basically you cannot name your variable or a function using those keywords. Like you cannot name your function or your variable, because Python knows that anything with that word means a particular, it has a special meaning. So it's important to know those keywords, and there are many. You can check them online. For example, this here shows you the Python keywords like true, assert, all this break. You cannot define a variable called break. That is what I'm trying to say here. So now you can see the indentation is very important. If I bring this here, there will be a problem. You can see it's highlighting that for me. So I can use the spaces, just count the spaces, or you can tab. So right now if I call this function, it should do this. So if I come here and I call this function by just doing this, writing the function name. So since this function doesn't have any parameters or arguments, I'll just call it that way. So that means if I run this code, it should print these statements. So in VS Code you can run this code by clicking this icon here, which will run this file, and you can see it has opened the Python terminal for me here. So it's running the code. Now you see it has printed for me the two statements, which is what we expected. Or you can just press Ctrl F5 on your VS. So if you want to change the shortcut that you're using to do anything in VS Code, you can change under the command palette here. So for example, things like run Python file, you can see currently there is no shortcut defined when I want to run a Python file in terminal, but I can come and change it when you click on the icon. So if I want to change it, I'll press some buttons on the keyboard and it's going to record that. For example, if I want to run my Python file with Shift X, maybe right now it has nothing. So when you press the addition button here, you can modify this. So I can say Shift X and I press enter. So right now if I have a current active Python file and I press Shift X, I'll be basically be running that file. So far we've learned a few basics of Python, how to run different ways you can run your code, the Python identifiers and the keywords and the indentation, which is very important, so you have to be keen on that. So what I just did was clearing my console because it was already full. So you can do that by typing CLS, that is clear your screen. So sometimes when you want to define a variable in Python, you might find that whatever you're defining is too long. For example, if I want to say I can create two variables which have strings. So how we create variables is by using the equal sign. I can say the food is too hot. What I've done here is I've created a new variable a which contains this string here. So if I create a new variable my place is cool. This is another variable which contains a string. So basically what I'm trying to say here, if you don't understand what I'm saying, don't worry, because you're going to get to understand this later in the other tutorials. What I'm saying is, if you ever find yourself that the code you're writing is too long, or whatever you want to write is too long, you can always use the line continuation character in VS Code. So for example, I'm trying to find something. If we decide to give these variables a different name, which is maybe a longer name, I can say first tutorial, and this, I'm just trying to find long names here to demonstrate what I'm trying to say. So let's create a new variable, third. Okay, could you get me some coffee? So we have these three variables. So you can see Python is really easy when you're defining your variables. You don't have to specify the type. So by just placing the double quotes, it will know this is a string. So for example, if I want to have all these values in one sentence, I would say I can create a new variable and I want to add all these together. So since they are strings, we can add them by concatenating them. That is, we use the addition sign. So I want to have a fourth variable called what can we call it? You can say fourth. Tutorial is, now I want to add the first. So VS is already sensing the existing variable, so when I type it, it's going to suggest it for me. So you can just select it and press tab and it's going to do that. And I want to say plus the second tutorial. Now at this point, if maybe I'm feeling like this line is already too long, I can use the line continuation character, which is this. And when I go on, Python will be able to know that this is a continuation of the previous line. So I can say plus third. Okay, third tutorial. So that means if I print the fourth tutorial, I should get all these sentences. So now if I say print, so now when printing this, I don't have to put the double quotes because this is a variable carrying this information. So I just say print fourth tutorial. So what we've done here is we've used the line continuation character, which it helps tell Python that this, whatever is in this next line, it's still part of this line. So if I run this code, you can see it has added all these statements, okay, without a space because we didn't add a space. The food is too hot. Hey, my place is cold. Could you get me some coffee? So yeah, we have all the statements. So we've used the line continuation character. So it's important to ensure your code is not too long. So to ensure you always follow the Python guidelines, you can read the Python PEP guideline. I'll share the link for that because it will tell you how to define your functions, how many characters should be in a particular code line, how should you do some things, how should you write your if statements. Basically, it's very important to know that. So that's the end of this tutorial, guys. I hope you've learned something new in Python today, and see you in the next video.